My sister Ruby was arranged to marry Ethan, the so-called foolish eldest son of the Harley family, since childhood. The night before the wedding, she ran off with the butler's son. To keep up the trustworthy merchant image, I, her twin sister, had to take her place and marry instead. Turns out, the Harley family's eldest wasn't just smart but also became the head of the Harley family through cleverness. Feeling betrayed and deeply resentful, Ruby ended up stabbing me to death and then took her own life. When I opened my eyes again, we had both gone back to the day Ruby was to marry into the Harley family. Ruby cuddled close to our mother, who was filled with pity. Ruby has always been bright, well-educated, and kind-hearted. Everybody praised her for it, and we especially doted on her. Yet, today you want her to marry a fool. Looking at my silent husband, my mother couldn't hold back her complaints. Even if the Harley family is rich, that eldest son is a fool and could never take over the family's business. Maybe my father's patience wore thin with the nagging because he finally spoke up, a bit annoyed. Even if Ethan isn't very capable, he'll always have the Harley family's protection. Are you really worried Ruby would suffer there? My mother flared up, her face turning red. You don't care about Ruby at all. Father cut her off sharply. Enough. But mother wasn't backing down and insisted Ruby shouldn't be married off to the Harley family. Darling, for Ruby's sake, please go talk to the Harley family, maybe there's room to negotiate? Tomorrow's the wedding day, there's no time for that. Father smashed a teacup on the table when suddenly, Ruby stood up and knelt on the floor. Mother, I accept this marriage. If we back out now, won't it hurt Father's reputation for keeping his word? Even if it's to a fool, or even a dead man, I must marry. Seeing her daughter's resolve, Mother had no choice but to help her up, comforting her as she led her back to her room. That night, Ruby knocked on my door. Mia, I'm getting married tomorrow. I just wanted to say goodbye. Without waiting for my response, she walked into my room, sat at my vanity, and picked up my makeup, sniffing it. I know you remember our past life too. But this time, I'm not letting you get lucky. The future Mrs. Harley family head will be me, Ruby. I took the makeup from her hand, smiling. Sister, isn't it a little early to be boasting? I sighed. I'm just afraid that tomorrow you might not get married. Ruby suddenly glared at me fiercely before storming out. The next day, the time to declare vows at the chapel had long passed, but the Harley family still hadn't shown up. I had predicted it all. Father sent someone to the Harley family, only to hear they called off the wedding. Ruby instantly went mad. Father and Mother tried to comfort her, but as soon as she heard the news, she stormed towards me furiously. She yanked me from my chair, gripping my throat, her expression twisted. Mia. What did you do? You said one thing yesterday, now today the Harley family backs out. It's you. You're jealous. Her grip on my neck tightened, the suffocation growing stronger. Her forehead and neck veins bulged, my vision blurred. Chaos erupted in the chapel as several people pulled Ruby away. She tried to attack again but was stopped by Father's stern voice. Even restrained, she still cursed me. Mia. You'll die a terrible death. My parents assumed she couldn't accept what happened and quickly comforted me a few words before turning back to calm Ruby down. Almost like the one who nearly lost their life was Ruby. I've long been used to how our parents favor her, blatantly, for as long as I can remember. I'm not like Ruby, I don't know how to charm others. I don't hire singers for Father's birthdays nor write birthday poems. I don't donate huge sums to charity. All I do every day is read books in my room or go horseback riding. I only appear when my parents call for me to listen and obey, the rest of the time I don't even try to win their favor. It's always been like this, and today is no exception. Ruby, heartbroken from the cancellation, locked herself in her room, refusing to see anyone. She didn't even open the door for our parents bringing food. Seeing Ruby hadn't eaten or drunk anything for days, Father finally slammed his hand on the table in anger. How dare the Harley family? Canceling on the wedding day, we've been awaiting their explanation for days, and not a single word. Ruby's wedding day shame spread quickly, soon the whole town was gossiping that she must have been terribly unchaste to be rejected. Ruby, the well-cultured lady, was now seen as disgraceful. My parents decided to go to the Harley family to demand an explanation, making me promise over and over to look after Ruby. Once they left, I knocked on Ruby's door. Sister, are you all right? I knew she would only see me, so I identified myself. Just as I thought, Ruby opened the door. Her face had tear stains, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot, looking utterly wretched. I told her our parents were seeking justice and handed her a glass of water. "Sister, here, have some water." She knocked the glass from my hand, shattering it on the floor. "Stop pretending, Mia. You're mocking me inside, aren't you? To heck with the title, Mrs. Harley family head will be me." I fired back since she wasn't willing to ease up. "You said that last time too. Look, did you get married after all?" Just that one sentence enraged her. She lifted her chin defiantly. "It was mine to begin with. Last time, you stole what was rightfully mine. Now, I'm taking it back, and rightly so." With a cold laugh, I closed in on her, eyes full of hate and determination. "Sister, maybe you're too overwhelmed to think straight. The butler's son is yours. Do you still wish to marry Ethan? Wake up." The memory of that handsome man in a suit, crying desperately as he held my lifeless body, was clear as day. I ground my teeth in anger, pushing her to the floor, her hand cut by the broken glass. Resolute, I left and asked a maid to clean up the shattered glass. Not long after, my parents returned, father looking gruff while mother seemed cautious and disappointed. Ruby straightened herself and came to greet them in the living room, anxiously waiting for good news. But who would have thought, father, in his fury, threw 2 pieces of paper onto the floor. "Damn it. It's a letter, along with a hospital report." Ruby knew exactly what it was as soon as she saw it. Her face turned pale and she dropped to her knees with a thud. Her dad reached out as if to hit her, but her mom stopped him so he could only point at her and yell. "We provided everything for you. We wanted you to become a true lady. But you made a lifelong promise with that butler's son, and now you're pregnant with his child." Ruby looked at the papers, her legs giving way beneath her. According to the timeline from her past life, she thought she might be pregnant but hadn't confirmed it yet. She had just gone to the hospital for a test. Her dad took a deep breath to calm his anger and continued speaking. "That butler's son waited for you in an alley. When you didn't show up, he sent you a letter, but people from the Harley family caught him. He even admitted that you might be pregnant. The Harley family sent someone to investigate at the hospital. They found out everything but kept quiet about it because of your reputation. The Harley family said they wanted Mia to marry in your place, pretending nothing happened, or else everyone would find out about this. The Harley family didn't want a pregnant daughter-in-law but didn't want to break off the engagement either. So the best solution was for me to marry into the family. If the news about Ruby got out, her parents wouldn't be able to cover it up for her. It would have been over for her." When her dad finished speaking, Ruby turned to look at me with a fierce gaze. But I ignored her look and nodded in agreement. "I'm willing to marry into the Harley family to protect my sister's reputation. Even if the guy I was marrying was a fool. I put on a pretentious show of being selfless, acting like I was making a great sacrifice. My parents came over to support and console me. Afterward, they left Ruby in the living room and took me upstairs to try on what should have been her wedding dress. The marriage deal with Ethan was settled. The Harley family announced that Ethan was unwell and unable to marry on the original wedding date, so the ceremony would be postponed for 2 weeks. Their announcement effectively shut down any rumors about my sister. During that time, nothing happened with her. Ruby always liked playing with perfumes. On the night before the wedding, she brought me some incense, saying she hoped I'd be surrounded by pleasant scents on my wedding day. It was late at night when I was about to go to sleep and suddenly felt dizzy, collapsing onto my bed. Soon, I heard someone quietly entering my room. When that person touched me, I opened my eyes suddenly. "Sister, you just don't change, do you?" Ruby was scared out of her wits, looking terrified. Before she could react, a stranger servant covered her mouth and nose with a towel to knock her out. "Take her back to her room. Don't wake up my parents or the maids. Make sure she's tied up." The servant nodded and left my room. Come dawn, the whole estate buzzed with excitement. Mom came to my room to oversee the maids getting me ready, and she finally took the brush from one to do my hair herself. "Mia, I think this is my first time doing your hair." I didn't expect the first time to also be the last. I looked at her face in the mirror, smiling gently without saying much. In my past life, she never did my hair or dressed me up. As a kid, Mom favored my sister and ignored me. Before I got married, she was too busy panicking over my sister's runaway act to bother with me. Compared to last time, this wedding was way more organized. Mom placed the veil on my head, her eyes tear-filled as she admired my face. If Ruby was getting married, she'd be just as beautiful. Mom paused and then switched the topic, realizing something. It's your wedding day, yet your sister is nowhere to be found. The maid doing my hair was sent to find Ruby, and Mom squeezed my hand, giving advice. She hadn't been this affectionate before. The Harley family's oldest son may be slow, but they'll treat you well. Once you're married, you can't be standoffish like you are at home. You'll need to get along with your husband's family. I forced a smile and promised, "Thanks for the advice, Mom. I'll remember." At the chapel, I saw Ethan through the white veil. The moment I spotted him, I fought the urge to run into his arms. Just like in my past life, he was in a white suit, awkwardly tugging on the flowers. His father, Mark, had to tap him to make him stand straight. As I walked slowly towards him, standing before him, there seemed to be a fleeting gentleness in his eyes, gone in a blink. I willingly took his arm, facing the priest. The guests witnessing this couldn't help but whisper. That Harley boy is a bit slow, and yet someone's marrying him? No help for it, it's an old family engagement. But look, isn't Mia looking kinda happy about it? What's she gonna do? Look sad at her wedding? Even if she wasn't, she'd play the part. I held his arm just a little tighter, and he stepped closer. We made our vows with the priest as our witness. Facing the guests, I noticed Ruby in the crowd. I smirked and leaned my head affectionately on Ethan. After the wedding feast, Ethan and I returned to our new room. He dropped the act, hugging me tightly with his head on my shoulder, his breath tickling my ear. Am I dreaming? Last time Ethan and I were only a married couple for 4 years. That first night, he confessed he wasn't actually slow and asked me to keep it secret. We got along well after that. Unlike other wealthy guys, Ethan didn't waste his time going wild with lots of mistresses. To avoid gossip, we always lived in the same room. But he'd sleep on the floor while I took the bed. We'd chat about poetry and discuss current events. He knew I loved horseback riding and promised we'd go riding when the time was right. Every time someone mocked me for marrying a slow guy, Ethan would feel guilty, saying it was his fault I had to endure it. He played the fool to mislead his stepbrother and stepmother. His real mother had a heart condition and died when she found his father with the stepmom. With the stepmom taking her place, he was all alone in that house. After getting feverishly ill, he faked being slow to protect himself. The stepmom, seeing him as slow, didn't see him as a threat to her own son's inheritance. Later, Ethan's brother, Ben, tried to get rid of their dad prematurely. Ethan stopped him just in time and exposed their plots to his dad. He didn't know if Ben would try to frame him, though. Before going ahead with his plans, he left me a check and keys to an apartment. If I fail, take the money and stay there for a while. I worry Ben might target you. I clutched the key, tears in my eyes, and hugged him. Ethan, from the day we took our vows, we were supposed to go through thick and thin together. If your plan failed and Ben became the head of the Harley family, we'd still stand together. But then the plan worked. Mr. Mark was rescued, and Ben's crimes were uncovered. Ethan took charge of the Harley family. I loved horse riding. He often took me to the stables, keeping his promise. We promised to grow old together in the first snow of winter. I eased his worries, and he kept me safe. Whenever I offhandedly said I liked something to eat, no matter how late or far, he'd make sure to get it for me. We wished for our happiness to last forever. Shortly after I found out I was pregnant, I went to the hospital for a checkup. He had something to do and couldn't be with me. That day, my sister Ruby stabbed me in the chest with a knife and then took her own life. My spirit didn't disperse. Instead, it hovered, watching him dash frantically to my body. His eyes were bloodshot, and he roared like a beast, far from the elegant man he once was. He tried to slam himself against the hospital wall, but people held him back. Thankfully, fate gave us a second chance to start over. On the first day of my rebirth, Ethan sent me the keys to an apartment. My eyes lit up suddenly. He had also been reborn with memories of our past life. We exchanged letters, and I told him about my rebirth and my sisters. He arranged for capable subordinates to sneak into my house to protect me. We then caught the butler's son, who had ties with my sister, and broke off the engagement on our wedding day. After ending the engagement, we firmly told the family that the Harley family wouldn't accept a woman of questionable morals. To silence the locals, I proposed to marry into the Harley family in her place. Ruby's dream of living a life of luxury in the Harley family was shattered. Ethan removed the head ornament from my hair and pulled me into his arms. She won't back down just yet. She'll make a move. I held his face, kissed him gently, and spoke softly. Together, we'll face whatever comes. With you here, I fear nothing. He smiled, returned my kiss, and lifted me into his arms. A night to remember. On the third day after our wedding, we visited my parents, as we should. After eating, even though Ethan seemed simple-minded in front of them, given the size and reputation of the Harley family, my parents warmly welcomed him. While my parents were with Ethan, I went looking for my sister. In the backyard, when she saw no one was around, Ruby showed her true menacing face. "Mia, did you set all this up?" I watched her nearly lose it and just replied calmly. "Sister, you were the one who agreed to run away with the butler's son and bore his illegitimate child. It's the Harley family that rejected you, not me." Ruby had long lost her grace. Jealousy consumed her. I leaned against a column, arms crossed, speaking casually. "Keeping the butler's son at home isn't a solution. I had him brought here today, locked in the storage room. He was your lover, after all. Sister, do you want to see him?" Of course, Ruby would go. Not out of love, but sheer hatred. When she attacked me in the hospital in our past life, she was in rags, looking like a mad woman, bruised all over. Her terrifying scars were shocking to behold. All likely thanks to that butler's son. Mentioning him turned her into a vengeful demon, seeking to tear him apart. I moved forward, pretending to hold her back. In reality, I slipped a knife into her hand that I'd grabbed from the garden while trimming plants. Ruby, as if possessed, ignored my words and rushed to the storage room. By the time I got there, all I could hear were a man's gasps and pleas and a woman screaming shrilly. The man lay in a pool of blood, numerous holes pierced through him. He no longer had the strength to cry out, his voice reduced to a feeble whimper with each stab. With hatred accumulated over 2 lifetimes, Ruby looked like a judge of hell, passing judgment with each stab. "I gave up my life as a wealthy daughter for you. You swindled me out of my money and even tried to sell our child to pay debts. I endured the hunger and didn't care that you made me work and wash clothes at dawn, but you beat me for the slightest mistake." Remembering the most hated memory, she plunged the knife deepest. "You even forced me into prostitution." When she finished pronouncing her last judgment, the butler's son breathed his last. Listening to her cries, I felt dazed. I never imagined her life was so miserable after running away in the previous life. Thinking about how she likely struggled to escape and, seeing me as the wife of the Harley family head, turned all her pride and humiliation into hatred for me. She had waited at the hospital, alone, after learning about my pregnancy, ending both our lives and her grudge with a single strike. A woman's shriek interrupted my thoughts. It was my mother. Unused to seeing her daughter this blood-soaked, she fainted at the sight of Ruby. Her scream brought Ruby back to her senses. She slumped to the floor, the bloody knife dropping from her hand, her other hand covering her mouth as she screamed. The house plunged into chaos. Seeing my sister in her maniacal state, Ethan and I left under the pretense of not wanting to disturb them. After that day, my mother took to bed, unwilling to see Ruby and haunted by her hellish appearance. Father made my sister kneel at the ancestral hall to repent but found a scapegoat to cover up her crime. When the Lantern Festival rolled around, Mr. Mark suggested Ben marry Ruby to strengthen family ties. Father, thinking it would bring the Harley family's fortune to ours, happily agreed. This news spread quickly, with everyone saying the 2 prominent families were joining forces, ready to dominate the business world. At the family banquet, Ethan sat with me. He pretended to be naive, carelessly spilling his wine. I wiped it off, and we exchanged glances, understanding without needing words. After the banquet ended that night, Ethan gave an order to his subordinates. "Let's start the plan." A year later, it was Ben and Ruby's wedding. Ethan and I were there to witness it as part of the family. In her white wedding dress, Ruby smiled as she walked toward Ben. At the evening's banquet, I toasted her. "Sister, congratulations. Her smile grew a bit wider as she leaned in to whisper in my ear, her words just for us to hear. My dear sister, I'm about to become the wife of the head of Harley family, making me nobler than you in the end. I pretended not to hear and went to tend to Ethan, who was feigning madness. Ben was standing there in a sleek black suit, raising a glass. He had a gentle smile, and he looked quite approachable. When he glanced my way, he gave a polite nod, but there was something unreadable in his eyes. During the dinner, Ben sat at our table and said to me with a smile. Sister-in-law, when my brother was 6, he had a high fever and became somewhat foolish. You've been so attentive to him, I thank you on his behalf. I've been busy with the wedding, so I'm not sure how he's been lately. I pursed my lips and finally spoke. He's the same, not quite all there. But I'll stick by him. For years, Ethan has been pretending to have the mind of a 5-year-old. Ben stared at Ethan and me for a long time before looking away. Not long after, a server brought over a bowl of hot soup and spilled it on me. The moment Ethan saw the soup spilling, his expression changed immediately. He wanted to come over to check on me, but with so many guests around, he couldn't blow his cover. Ben scolded, "How could you be so careless? What if she's burned? Take her to get it dealt with right away." I followed the server to the restroom to clean up the soup stain. I hadn't finished when there was a sudden knock on the door. It was Ethan. Mia. Mia. I was taken aback. Since I didn't respond for a while, he just came in. Seeing me, he let out a sigh of relief. Thank goodness you're okay. When we came out, Ben was leaning lazily against the wall watching us. He shot Ethan a glance, then just smirked and walked away. After the party ended, we went home. Ethan gently applied ointment to my burns and blew on the scalded skin. I'm sorry, it's all because of me. If not for me, Ben wouldn't have had someone spill soup on you. Ruby must have told him I've been faking it. After you went to the restroom, he hinted to me that you were in danger and I panicked. He was trying to test if what Ruby said was true. Seeing his guilty and worried face, my heart ached a bit. I caressed his face. Ethan nuzzled into my hand. In this life, he married Ruby, who remembers our past lives. Because of Ruby, he started to be wary of me. To avoid dragging this out, he'll likely act fast this time. Mia, we need to take control of how things play out. After Ruby's wedding, I've been feeling sleepy all the time, dizzy, and a little nauseous. Ethan wanted to take me to the hospital, but I refused, thinking it was no big deal. He suggested we take a trip to Los Angeles, saying being in nature might make me feel better. On our way back at the train station, there was suddenly a commotion next to us. Murder. Murder. Someone was waving a knife around wildly nearby. In the chaos, I heard a noise and saw Ethan fall. Mia, run. I rushed him to the nearest hospital. I was by his side day and night, but in the end, all I got was the doctor's death certificate. My heart twisted with pain, and I couldn't hear anything around me. I collapsed to the ground in despair. I wanted to smash my head against his bed but was stopped by Mr. Mark. Mia, the doctor said you're pregnant. Ethan died young, but the child you're carrying is his only bloodline left in the world. You can't do anything rash. The white silk of the Harley family floated in the air. Ethan's good friend, the sheriff, came to comfort me, and I softly said, "Sheriff, rest assured." He seemed to understand what I meant and nodded before leaving. That night, I took out 2 letters and handed them to Ethan's loyal subordinate. Go. The cold wind howled. Today is the 3rd day of the wake, and many guests have come to pay their respects. I wrapped myself in a white fur coat, looking pale and overcome with grief. My sister Ruby, dressed in garishly bright colors, sauntered from her room to the main hall. Ruby's red lips and rosy complexion were a stark contrast to me. If someone didn't know better, they'd think she was the bride. She came over to me, putting on a show of sympathy. Pity Ethan was not only foolish in life but also died young. After all, you're not only my sister but also my sister-in-law. Ben and I will take care of you for Ethan. Her tone was regretful, but she clearly looked smug. She bowed slightly in front of the coffin, her smile suggesting she was pleased with his passing. The guests murmured at her behavior, and a bold young woman loudly denounced her. Ruby, you're both sister and sister-in-law to Ethan's wife. Is this really appropriate? Ruby snorted, not caring, as if celebrating some great event. The Harley family, grateful for everyone coming from afar to mourn, invited the guests to stay for dinner. Once the meal started, Ruby eagerly poured Mr. Mark a glass of wine, smiling broadly. "You've worked hard these past few days because of my brother." Mr. Mark didn't drink the wine and handed the glass to Ben. "Ruby, it's been Ben who's been busy all these days. This glass should be for Ben." The move was odd in itself. Ben's expression shifted to slight panic before he quickly composed himself. "No way, it's more appropriate for you to drink. Things went smoothly thanks to you." I lowered my head and smiled slightly. "Those letters I sent yesterday, they did the trick." In this life, Ben has Ruby as an unexpected variable. So instead of waiting around, I chose to act. Last night, I caught Ben's spy by Mr. Mark's side and sent out false info. I said Mr. Mark planned to leave Harley family to my unborn child after 100 years. Fearing any change to his inheritance of the family, Ben believed the deception. The second letter stated that Ben would poison Mr. Mark the next day during the meal, blending in with the chaos, and he'd take over smoothly. I also mentioned in the letter that Ethan's death was related to Ben. Mr. Mark wasn't fully convinced but had his doubts. With a sigh, Mr. Mark stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for Harley family's lack of hospitality today. Matters require urgent attention, and I must ask you to return home for now. We will make it up to you another day." The guests were all talking among themselves, but still, they left as Mr. Mark had suggested. After they were gone, Mr. Mark turned to Ben. "Ben, let me ask you something. Is there poison in this drink?" Ben was terrified, his legs going weak as the plan fell apart. "How could it be? What are you talking about?" Mr. Mark shouted sternly, "I'm asking you again. Is it poisoned?" Ruby, hearing this, immediately grabbed the glass pitcher and aimed it at Mr. Mark. In the nick of time, I pushed her away. Ethan came in with the police from outside. "Ruby, Ben, Anna, you're suspected of attempted murder. Please come with us." Anna is the stepmother's name, and she was involved in what happened at the train station too. The murder charge refers to killing the servants who knew about the poisoning, not the attempts to poison Mr. Mark or kill Ethan. Ruby looked at Ethan in disbelief. He was alive and back. Her plans failed, and she lost her mind. Of course, I knew what she was up to all these years. The next second, she tried to smash her head with the glass pitcher, but I stopped her. They were taken away. I rushed and hugged Ethan. "Ethan, it's over." All three of them ended up at the police station. After some investigation, stepmother Anna was accused of murder, having killed Ethan's birth mother. It wasn't a heart attack, it was Anna's drug that caused heart palpitations, and Ethan's mom saw it. Ben and Ruby attempted to poison someone but failed. They also faced punishment for attempting to harm Ethan and eliminating the witnesses. The sheriff was Ethan's close friend, and I asked to visit Ruby in jail. She had lost her high and mighty appearance, curled up in the cold jail cell. I brought her favorite yellow croaker, placing it in front of her. "My mom made it especially for you. Because of what you did, our parents are really upset." Ruby knocked over the fish. "They deserve it. Ever since they saw me kill the butler's son, they've avoided me. I'm going to make them and everyone else realize I'm a proper lady. I'll still be the mistress of the Harley family with endless wealth." Ruby never admitted defeat. But her arrogance faded as her title vanished. After a while, she asked me, "Ethan was shot at the train station, and the hospital said he died. How is he still alive?" I squatted down to meet her eyes and explained. "Do you know why he got shot and why the hospital declared him dead? Actually, he's very nimble, he could dodge the bullets. Plus, to be safe, he wore a bulletproof vest that day." According to the original plan, Ben would discover by accident 3 years later that his brother wasn't crazy. By then, Ethan would have exposed Ben's true colors while saving Mr. Mark. But this lifetime had a twist. Ruby, with her memories of her past life. She knew Ethan was playing dumb and that he hated Ben and Anna because of what happened to his mom. She also knew he would eventually take over the Harley family. She never married Ethan, but her ego wouldn't let her accept being below me. So, she bet on Ben, hoping to compete for the Harley family's inheritance. She figured if Ethan died, Ben would be next in line. They planned to have Ethan killed, but Ethan and I saw it coming. Rather than letting a time bomb stay with us, we decided to lure them out. Ethan and I went to Los Angeles alone, paying the hospital to release a false death report so Ben would think he's got the inheritance. With Ben still shaken from dealing with one brother, I forced Ben's informant to send fake intel to Ben saying Mr. Mark might pass the family to his grandson due to my pregnancy. Finally, when they panicked, Ethan came in with the police to arrest them right there in the Harley family mansion. Ruby suddenly laughed, a crazy sound. She pushed me down. Why? 2 lifetimes. And I still can't beat you. Why? I should have been the favored daughter. In the last life, I was deceived by my lover. In this life, if it weren't for you, I'd have married Ethan. Then all the wealth and glory would be mine. I sat on the ground, looking at my sister who had lost her mind, and said calmly, no, you could never have married Ethan. Ruby fell back, lying on the ground, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted to live better than you, what's so wrong with that? I stood up, looking at her, and left her with one thing. You're not wrong. Everyone has the right to fight for themselves. But in this game, you lost. Walking out of the prison, Ethan offered me his jacket. Seeing that I was deep in thought, he said gently, I can ask to spare your sister's life. I firmly interrupted him. No, she has to die. If we don't kill her, she wouldn't want to live. She's such a proud person. She'd rather smash her head than live on. He adjusted my hair, and suddenly I turned around and hugged his neck. When you died in our past life, what were you thinking about? He was startled for a moment, then smiled at me. Well, I was thinking, with such a big hole in me, would you be scared and decide to leave me? His words made me laugh, and I pinched his nose. Quit your nonsense. He held me by the waist and we got into the car. In the previous life, after I died, maybe I was so worried about Ethan that my soul lingered instead of moving on. I followed him day and night, never leaving his side. I watched him drink excessively, break down at night, and seek revenge for me, blinded by anger. He made the Harley family business thrive and adopted a child. That child was well taught and took over the family business. Eventually, Ethan went to a temple, kneeling at the feet of the deity. I dare not speak of doing good deeds in my life. But the wealth I earned was for the country and the people. All I ask is for my wife, Mia, to have a life of peace, health, and happiness. Even if the one by her side isn't me. My spirit looked at him, my heart aching, completely defeated. Suddenly a sound rang out, and he died in front of my eyes. I wanted to stop him, pat his face, but couldn't move. I was disappearing. When I opened my eyes again, I looked down at a key in my hand. It was an apartment key from our past life, given to me by Ethan in case his plan backfired because of Ben. Staring at the key, tears streamed down my face.